Mr Speaker.
I call Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak to the Residential Tenancies Safe and Secure Rentals Amendment Bill, just to follow on from a colleague, Alfred Naro, a bill that we won't be supporting. Hearing some of the points of the opposition, it's fair to say I think they're making some very valid points around where we should be ending up around providing an element of safety and security for tenants. I suppose the argument's going to be is about how we get to that point. And some of the clauses in this proposed bill, Mr Speaker, I fundamentally disagree with. Just to start off with, in the explanatory note under the general policy statement, a very sort of pejorative claim that comparatively little done to address issues faced by renters. And I think, as my colleague Alfred Naro mentioned, when we look at the Residential Tenancies Amendment that we touched on this year, bringing in more insulation for rental properties, bringing in smoke alarms, mandatory smoke alarms for rental properties. I've got 6 volunteer fire brigades in my electorate, all reporting back about the positive changes and impacts those amendments are already making in residential properties. Also, when you look at an area like Canterbury, I think it's a good lesson that can be rolled out to the rest of the country. I mean, post-earthquake, there was large tracts of land freed up, which increased supply, which equals demand. And what's happened in the rental market there, Mr Speaker, rents have dropped considerably, about 10% in the last year. And what that has allowed is tenants to have the pick of some of the properties that they would like. Because I think where this is going to land is the fundamental principle is, can we legislate to get to this end point? And I would say we can't, because basically what this should be built on is the contract between the landlord and the tenant. The premise that a landlord doesn't want to sustain a good tenant is incorrect. In fact, I think it's the complete opposite, Mr Speaker, that any good landlord knows the value of a good tenant. And many good landlords would keep a good tenant in, at even below market price, because they know there's no value in having an investment property that might sit vacant for 4, 6 or 8 weeks while they're bringing in new tenants. And that allows for a good working relationship between good tenants and good landlords, Mr Speaker, and I think that's what we should be focusing on. The member in the bill also raises the issue around covering the cost of fees for leasing the property. And I can appreciate some of that. I was in London last week for the CPA Westminster trip with Jenny Salisa from Labour. And actually in Hammond's first autumn statement, they have brought in a law outlawing leasing fees, the exact what this is prescribing. However, it's already shown that that is passed on to the price of the rent. So I don't agree with this. However, maybe something around transparency of fees I believe would be the right way forward for people who are choosing to rent a property to understand more about how are those leasing fees calculated and whether they choose to take that property and pay those leasing fees, Mr Speaker. I think the clause about only allowing rent reviews every 12 months, I think that's slightly illogical. I mean, if the principle behind that is it will reduce rent increases to only once every 12 months, say it was going to be every 6 months, the landlord would put it up $10. Well, at 12 months, I'd just put it up $20. So I don't think the frequency of rent review is really the issue here. It's about having the ability for the landlord and the tenant to work together to understand what is a good contract and what is right for them. Because when we look at the issue around the 90-day notice, well, it is reduced for landlords who are selling their house. But bearing in mind, tenants will know this, the house will be advertised, and at the end of the day, if the landlord needs to sell their house, well, that they need to sell their house. And that's why I don't support this bill. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Cool. Put a